Yeah, on October 19th, 2017, the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii found the first object that came from outside the solar system in our neighborhood. And it was given the name Oumuamua, which means a scout in the Hawaiian language. And at first, astronomers thought, well, it must be a rock, just like a comet or an asteroid that we have seen before from within the solar system. But actually, it's a very interesting finding because it's just like finding an object from the street in your backyard. So it saves you the trip to go to the street and figure out what's going on out there, since the object made the trip. And, you know, traveling between stars takes a long time. With chemical rockets that we have right now, or at the speed of Oumuamua, it takes about 50,000 years to go to the nearest star. So fortunately, it already made it to our backyard, so we better examine it. And in fact, we didn't expect an object like Oumuamua to be discovered. I wrote a paper a decade earlier saying that the number of rocks that we could discover is much smaller than what you need to see one of them in a survey like Pan-STARRS had. So that was a surprise by itself. But then as we gathered more data on this object, it looked very weird. As one of my colleagues said after hearing a colloquium on this object, he said, well, this object is so weird, I wish it never existed, which to me sounded like a completely wrong approach, because here is an opportunity to learn something new that you haven't expected. So we should cherish that rather than resent it. And the reason it looked weird is because, first of all, as it was tumbling every 8 hours, its brightness changed by a factor of 10, and the amount of sunlight that it reflected was changing by a factor of 10, meaning that it has an extreme shape, and in fact, most likely flat, pancake shape. And then, in addition, the object was pushed away from the sun by some force, in addition to the force of gravity that was acting on it. And that force declined inversely with distance from the sun squared. And there was no cometary tail around it, so there couldn't be a rocket effect pushing it from evaporated gases like we see in comets.
Right.
And so the only explanation that I could think of was the reflection of sunlight. And for that to be effective, the object had to be very thin, sort of like a sail on a boat, except not being pushed by the wind, but being pushed by reflecting sunlight. And this is called the light sail, which is basically a thin sheet of material that reflects light, and as a result, it gets pushed. Just like when you imagine billiard balls bouncing off a surface, they give it a push. And in the same way, particles of light, when they bounce off a sail, they give it a push. And it turns out that in September 2020, there was another object discovered, which exhibited a push as a result of reflecting sunlight, and no cometary tail. And it was given the name 2020 SO. It was discovered by the same telescope, Pan-STARRS. But shortly afterwards, the astronomers realized, actually, this object, if you trace it back in time, came from Earth. It's actually a rocket booster that was launched in 1966. And it had very thin walls. And that's why it had a lot of area for its weight, for its mass. So it could be pushed by reflecting sunlight. And we know that we made this object. It's artificial. We don't know who made Oumuamua.
And that's where the big question comes in.
That's right.
We are not alone.
Maybe we are not. But of course, the way to find out, to be confident that it's artificial and not natural, is to take a photograph. We couldn't take a photograph of this object because it was too far away and rather small, roughly the size of a football field. But you can imagine in the future, you know, when I go to the kitchen and I see one ant, I get alarmed because there must be many more out there. And so, given that we found this object within a few years of looking at the sky, we will find many more in the future. And if we find one on its approach to us, and we have an alert a year in advance, we could send a spacecraft equipped with a camera that will take a close-up photograph. And we could potentially even land on it, just like the mission OSIRIS-REx that took a photograph and landed on the asteroid Bennu. And just imagine taking a photograph of an artificial object. It would look very different than a rock. And then landing on it may allow us to read off the label made on planet X. And maybe even import a technology back to Earth. Right. That could be worth a lot of money because it may represent a technology that will take us 1 million years to develop ourselves. So it could be very exciting if something like that is found.